After all, today's webinar is really about helping you as much as I can in terms of becoming more effective, applying some strategies to actually use Party Matrix and come out having a clear alignment with your team and understand what it is that you need to work on. So if there's any doubts, any questions whatsoever, it is a perfect time to ask. The other thing I want to mention is, over the years, I've had the privilege to talk to thousands of customers. And so I've seen pretty much everything. So if there's any issues that you may have, I'd be happy to address those as well. With that, we'll jump right in. The goals for today, it is an introduction webinar. So I want to make sure that you understand the basics of Party Matrix, the software, how to use it, and why to use it, and then help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, project, and emails. Those are the three fundamental elements of Party Matrix, and I'll show you how to use each of those capabilities. And then help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Party Matrix. And then also, I think one of the most important thing is showing you 20% of the features that will give you 80% of the benefits. I think the Pareto rules applies here. There's just so many capabilities that you can use, but at the end of the day, you don't have to use them all. Use only what's needed for you to be most efficient and most effective. And you can think of Party Matrix as sort of like a buffet of capabilities. And then from there, you choose what you need most. And then provide you some tips and tricks to prioritize better, because I think that having seen so many customers use Party Matrix in so many different ways, I think at the end of the day, there are ways to use it well, and there are ways that you can use it wrong. And hopefully I'll give you some tips that will help you get started. And then lastly, I think that the most important thing is that when you walk away from this webinar, you have a strategy to be aligned with your team. And again, if I don't meet these goals, that means I'm doing it wrong, right? That means I'm not showing you what it is that's needed. And in that case, definitely call me out on it and tell me what it is that you'd like to see, and I'd be happy to address those. Okay. So let's start with the question, why do you even prioritize? There's three reasons customers come to Party Matrix. The first is to be better at keeping track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. The second is to create alignment across team members so that everyone knows what's important. And then the third is to take controls of emails and meetings. And then a corollary to that is what happens when you don't prioritize. And I think there's three things that happens. The first is you lose sight of what's important and you end up working on the wrong things. In my opinion, this is one of the most important reasons why we should be very cautious about how we prioritize our task and all that. The worst thing that could happen is you spend all your efforts, all your energy working on the wrong task. I don't know, you've probably seen this many times in your work career, but you work on a report and you slave over it, you spend days and you stay up late and you get it done and you send it out and no one reads it. Imagine that kind of work. And I think that applies to everything that we do every single day. There's so many tasks in our work, in our life that we work on that don't truly matter. And so it's not about being able to always identify that, but having a focused conversation to ensure that everyone's aligned is the first step towards addressing that. And then secondly, you feel busy, but you're not meeting your goals. And I bring this up because sometimes that I feel the same way. I have so many things on my plate. I have hundreds of projects. I have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of tasks that I can look at any point in time. And so there's always something to do, but I always have to be cognizant of what my overarching goals are. And those goals can be my weekly goals, my monthly goals, my quarterly goals, my annual goals, or even my life goals. But you always have to be cognizant of that and think about, am I working on the things that matter most for me? And then thirdly, you're completely overwhelmed by emails and meetings. I think this applies to all of us, almost no matter what industry we work in. And so I imagine that the vast majority of you who's listening to this webinar right now, as well as the recording afterwards, you're facing the same challenges, right? There's only very few reasons why people go and search for a tool to become more productive and more effective. That's because they're so overwhelmed by all the things that they have. And so the good thing is, none of these are unique. So many of you face the same challenges as many other folks I've talked to. So what is Party Matrix? So just in case you have very little understanding of what the software is, It is a software that helps with prioritizing emails, tasks, and projects. And it helps at 3 different levels. The most important level, in my opinion, is the individual level. Every single one of us have our own list of priorities, and every single day we have to decide, what is it that I need to work on? Do I work on that last email that just came in, or is there something that's actually much more important that I need to surface up and get it done? And then what happens is that if we can help you as the individual prioritize your task and emails really effectively and efficiently, then we can actually go and take that um, that control of your priorities and actually propagate it to the rest of your team. So then you can go and able to have an alignment with your team so that everyone's on the same page and everyone's actually working on the right things. And then lastly, as you use Protomatrix more, what happens is that you end up having so many tasks and history of all the changes, of all the things that you do. Protomatrix create a single source of truth, and it helps organizations actually transfer knowledge from one person to another, from one team to another, and then actually helps with both onboarding and offboarding processes. So if you're a business owner or if you're a manager and you've seen your team churn and you have new people and so forth, and how challenging it is for someone new to take over another person's task, that's one of those things that Protomatrix does extremely well at as well, which is to take all those priorities and be able to transfer it to the next person. So what makes Protomatrix better? It's the only project email and meeting management software that is Microsoft 365 security certified across Teams, Microsoft Teams, across Outlook, and across the web app. We're deeply integrated into the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. You don't have to use Microsoft to actually use Protomatrix because our software works completely independent of that. But if you do work with Microsoft, we're probably the most integrated solution. And not only that, we are integrated with the whole new Microsoft Copilot as well. I won't go into the details around that, but if your organization is at the forefront of AI and using that to help you guys become more effective, then definitely reach out to us and we'd be happy to show you what we're able to do there. And then thirdly, Protomatrix focuses on prioritization, hence the name, front and center every step of the way. So I hope that when you walk out from this webinar and you think about Protomatrix versus every single piece of software you've used in the past, and you realize the one major difference is how much we talk about prioritization and how really focused we are on making sure that you work on the most important tasks at any point in time. Because, the reality is we can always be excellent at whatever it is that we do, but if we're excellent at the things that matter most, then that's when we have the most impact. Fourthly, Protomatrix provide what I call people-centered collaboration. It's actually a way of flipping the data that we have and actually looking at from the perspective of you and your colleagues. What do you have to do for your manager? What do you have to do for your clients? What do you have to do for your team? And then lastly, Protomatrix is available as a standard SaaS solution, an Azure government cloud solution, as well as a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences. We also have enterprise software solution as well. So if your organization actually have some requirements that's beyond our standard SaaS solution, then definitely reach out to us. What makes Protomatrix effective is actually 3 things. First, help you understand what it is you need to do now, what it is that you need to do later, and what it is that you need to delegate or actually not do at all. So at the end of all that, Protomatrix offers one single place where everyone in your team can go to know exactly what needs to be done. So hopefully when I walk you through the product and actually show you what Protomatrix does, I want you to think about how you can use Protomatrix to track your task, to track the things you have to do, and then be able to take that and communicate that to everyone else. That's it. And if you do that and you don't do anything else with Protomatrix, I'm pretty confident you'll come out feeling a lot more aligned and a lot more effective at how you're spending your time. So let's start at the fundamental behind Protomatrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And what I really like about this quote is it helps us understand that not everything that's urgent is actually the most important task. And let me give you an example. Let's just say this morning when you woke up or when you first got to the office, what did you do? You check your emails, right? And then you probably got, multiple emails over the course of the night. And so for me, I get dozens of emails overnight. And when I look at it, guess what? I look at the top email first because that's the last email in. And so that's the urgent aspect of all of that. And is that the most important email? The answer is no, but likely that's the first email I'm going to respond to. And so every single day, if you take that same challenge and actually spread it across all the different types of problems we're working on, we are constantly bombarded by new things. That last text message, that last Teams chat that your manager sent you, or that last email you just received, or that someone coming over to your office and knocking on the door and asking you, hey, can you do this? And so those are the things that are urgent. The things that are important sometimes are actually just sitting in the back burner, right? The most important report you have to work on, actually doing something that's really critical for your clients or your customer. And so every single day we have to ask ourselves the question, am I working on the most important things, or am I just working on the most urgent things? So there's something called the Eisenhower matrix, which spawns from that quote, and it creates what I call a really powerful time management framework. And so instead of having one long list of tasks, you take everything that you have to do and split it into the dimensions of importance and urgency. And what it does is it helps you visualize everything that you have to do from the perspective of these two dimensions. And so instead of actually having a list of maybe 15 or 20 things that you can work on at any point in time, you put them into these 4 buckets. The things that are important and urgent, you do now. The things that are important but not urgent, you start planning for. The things that are urgent but not important are the stuff that you delegate. And then lastly, you shouldn't have anything that's not important and not urgent on your plate. Instead, you use quadrant 4 as your inbox. That's where you can, when you're brainstorming and you're ideating or whatever it is, it goes into your inbox. And then from there, you prioritize them into the different buckets. So let me give you a strategy that you can use, when you're working on your emails, for example. Imagine you open your email and of course you have 10 or 20 new emails, right? That is the equivalent of your inbox. Then instead of actually just responding to them, you're actually just looking at them and say, okay, let me see where these belong. And you can use Party Matrix to actually prioritize them and say, you know what, this email is important and urgent, and I'm going to set a due date on it. This email is important, but I cannot answer it right now, so I'm going to put it into quadrant 2 so I can plan for it later. And then this is something that I can delegate to another person who can actually tackle this much better than me. And so now when you're actually done with that entire process, then, over the course of the 5 minutes, instead of actually just answering emails, you're just planning out your day and planning out your process. The same thing applies to every single task that you have. Your customer requests, right? So let's say you have external stakeholders who's asking you to do A, B, C. Instead of actually just going and just work on something arbitrary, what happens instead is you go and you take those tasks, you prioritize them, look at them and say, you know what? These are the how we're going to spend our time and how we're going to spend our effort, and then you execute that afterwards. So part of the process here is how much you spend, how much time you spend on actually planning your day. And if we don't do this prioritization, then we will be pulled away by the urgent things. So what makes the Eisenhower matrix so effective is because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And so when you think about Party Matrix, the hardest part about using our software is that you have to prioritize. And it is so ironic that, I've talked to so many people who struggle with using Party Matrix because they don't want to prioritize. And that's okay. You don't have to. But if you don't, you run the risk of being busy and not being able to get the right things done. And so you're in meetings constantly. And then afterwards, you realize, oh, wait, I'm working on things that don't even matter. And that's okay. So many people gravitate toward whatever it is that makes them happy, for lack of better words. That's because the urgent things, is that dopamine that actually gets us really excited. Oh, I got a new email. Oh, I got a new text. But the reality is, those are the things that we actually need to spend more time ignoring. And here's the amazing part about Party Matrix and where it adds the most value, which is, one, I want you to go and after this webinar, take the tasks that you have to do, write down the 15 things you have to do, and put into those buckets that I mentioned. Then ask your coworkers to do the exact same exercise. Ask all your key stakeholders, your managers, your clients, whoever it is that you work with on a constant basis where you need alignment. And then you compare notes, right? And so you ask your manager to look at his or her priorities, you share yours, and you look at your direct reports and see what their priorities are. And the non-obvious thing is the following. Success from using Protomatrix isn't about finding what everyone agrees on. That's the easy part. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. And if on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you're able to surface up some disagreements with your team, that means you've extracted the value out of the Protomatrix software. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. An analogy that I have is imagine walking around the office and seeing a 4-quadrant box floating over everyone's head. Imagine how powerful that would be. You know, imagine being able to sit down when you're talking to your clients and see the 4-quadrant floating over their head with them dictating, these are the priorities I have. These are the things that are important and urgent to me. These are the things that are important and not urgent. And these are the things that are not important or not urgent at all. And so having that clarity is where success from using the software comes from. A couple of tips for you to get to success quickly, and soon I'll show you how to actually use the software, which is if you're a manager, create a project for your team and staff meetings and then screen share it. So what happens is instead of just having a staff meeting where you're arbitrarily going through different tasks that everyone's been working on, use Protomatrix, write down the things that are important for everyone, and then project that on the screen. And when you're talking through, you can talk through the things that are in Q1 and then Q2, right? And if you find that you're not talking about those things and you're talking about something else, maybe that belongs on the list. Maybe that is important and urgent. And so what happens is that you'll quickly find whether or not you're working on the right things. If you use Protomatrix and you happen to manage multiple sites, so let's just say if you're a production manager and you have multiple factories that you're working on at any point in time, create a project for each site and location. So what that means is you end up having a Protomatrix for every single project or initiatives that you work on. If you have a specific training program, then you can create a project and template that follows those specific guidelines. So the way it works with Protomatrix is actually once you create a Protomatrix with all the tasks in it, you can actually save that as a template. And then in the future, when you need to launch another Protomatrix, you don't have to create those tasks again from scratch. This is a very useful scenario if, let's just say you have a customer onboarding process, right? So whenever you onboard a customer, you have 15 or 20 tasks that you do. Well, you can actually create that one time, save as a template, and then when you have the new customer, you just launch from the template and our due dates will automatically propagate for you. The same applies to an employee onboarding process. If you're a business owner, I recommend creating a project for each of your departments just as a way for you to quickly look through them and see what the priorities are. And here's the thing. You don't have time to have a meeting with every single person just to get alignment, right? You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to be able to get an understanding of what everyone's working on asynchronously. So you could be checking at 6 o'clock in the morning and someone else could be updating at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's okay. You guys are actually on totally different time, but you can still get a good understanding of what the priorities are and the status of every single task. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, create a project for your goals, use it to actually track your work and use the Protomatrix report capabilities for your promotion request. So one of the things that we at Affluence, we're working with using Protomatrix to be able to help you do is help you with achieving whatever goals is that you have. And I think the one of the most important is for us to get promotions or raise or whatever it is. And so Protomatrix actually adds a lot of accountability, and hopefully you can use Protomatrix to showcase your work and showcase how you're working on the right things. So in a nutshell, Protomatrix works across so many different types of use cases. It's just a matter of adapting to your needs. And so that's what we're here for. So if you have any questions, again, that's one of those things that, I can help with. So I do want to mention that the webinars are recorded. And so we post the webinars on affluence.com/webinars. And also we have a couple of other types of webinars as well on email management masterclass or about using templates and so forth. So if you need a deep dive into those, make sure you check out those webinars. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the product and now show you how to put this into practice. Okay, so here I have my Party Matrix open. One of the things that you'll see is that front and center is the 4 quadrants, right? Party Matrix is all about the 4 quadrants. And within the quadrants, I have my do now, do later, delegate, and inbox. So what happens is when you create a task in Party Matrix, you have to decide which of these quadrants it goes in. When you would start in the beginning, maybe you want to put in the inbox. So let me have an example. Let's just say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, that's something that I certainly have to do after this webinar. And then what happens in Party Matrix 2 is I actually can use what's called natural language to set due date. And so if you think about the tasks that you have, and if you want to make sure that you work on the things that are important and urgent, then setting due date is actually extremely important. If you don't have time set for a specific task, you might not ever get to it. And the simple reason is there will be something else that will fill in the gap. And so for me, my general recommendation to all of you and to everyone who really wants the most out of the Party Matrix, set due dates. And so here I'm going to say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. Party Matrix uses what's called natural language. And so when I say something like that, it automatically creates a task and set the due date for me using my local time. So if you're using Party Matrix and you say due tomorrow at 2 p.m., it'll use your local time to set that due date. Now that I've created this task, on the right-hand side is what's called the item details. This is where you can add additional information on the task itself. Now, here's the thing I want to emphasize real quick. A lot of these features are not needed for you to be successful with Party Matrix, right? Use these features for whatever purposes that is based on the way that you work. But I want to show you some of the capabilities that I think are important. One, the ability to star a task. So when you star a task, it actually adds a star icon here. And it is so important for us to actually constantly remind ourselves what are the things that's important and ensure that we are actually getting reminders on those tasks. So when I start a task, it pops at the top of the list. So when my 4 quadrants, have just like 10 or 15 items, that's not a big deal. That's easy to see. But if I have hundreds of tasks, then it's very important that I star the tasks that are most important. So then when I start my day, I know exactly where I need to focus my time. My general recommendation, you should have around 5 to 10 star tasks. And then right below that, you have the ability to add icons. And so there's many use cases for icons. One of the things I like is actually this red, yellow, and green. And it's just a way to signify whether something's on schedule or behind schedule. Below that is ownership. So when you start with Party Matrix, maybe you're using it by yourself. So obviously, if you create a task for yourself, owner is you. But sometimes you actually need to delegate to another person. So if you're a manager, you can actually go and delegate it to a coworker and now be able to get accountability and ensure that they work on this task based on this particular due date. And then next, I have progress, effort, reminders, and due dates. Now, due dates and reminders are 2 different things, but they're very, very important for different reasons. I explained to you how due dates is when something is due, but what happens is that, let's just say if I need to work on a critical task and it's going to take me 3 days to do, and then I wait until the day it's due to get started, clearly I would not get that done. So instead, what I have to do is I may have to set reminders ahead of time, right? And so I can say, remind me on 3 days prior so I can get started. But the way it works as Party Matrix is actually I can also use natural language to remind me daily. So now on a daily basis, Party Matrix will remind me to work on this task. Let me explain why this is so crucial. What happens is that our brain likes to work on those things that are urgent, right? As I mentioned earlier, it's that last email in, it's that last text, it's that last message, it's that last person that came into your office. So to overcome that, what happens is by setting yourself reminders on a constant basis, the most important tasks will pop back up over and over again to be top of mind. When we don't set due dates and when we don't set reminders, the most important things start falling behind because everything else is taking up space. So by setting a recurring reminder, it is a way to trick our brain and keep it top of mind so that we'll get to it. So my recommendation for all of you, when you have an important task, set a due date and then set a recurring reminders. So you saw how I actually type in the chat here. I type remind me daily. I can say remind me in 2 weeks, or I can say remind me weekly, remind me monthly. As an example, when I follow with customers and I have to do something that's a month out, if I just set a due date, I may get to it, but if I don't get to it, it will pass by and then I may miss that task completely. So when I need to follow up with the customer, I would say due in 1 month, and then I would say remind me monthly. And so that's a trick that I use, and it's extremely effective, and I recommend that you do it too. So when you create a task in Matrix, if it's something that's very important, set the due date and set that reminder. Below this, I have the chat section. This is where I can communicate. And so you see how I can actually chat with the task by setting these commands. But at the same time, it's a place for me and my coworkers to have a conversation around this task. And it's all about context, right? So if you have, imagine this, you're using Microsoft Teams and you're sending messages back and forth in a channel or with a conversation with somebody, and you're not talking about one thing, you're talking about 5 or 10 different things. And so later on in 6 months or a year, and you need to go back and review what it is you talked about, it is so difficult to have the right context. And not only that, if you need to bring on someone new, they'll have zero context. And so by using the chat section within the context of each task, you can have a conversation, but it is tailored, or it is stored within the context of that task. And so when you have a new person, you're all on the same page and they can actually catch up real fast. I want to make an aside real quick here. One of the challenges I've seen with customers is actually employee turnover. And you've probably seen this. You work with somebody and on really closely on a project, and they have a bunch of tasks, and then they leave abruptly. And then guess what? You have no idea what it is that they worked on. You have no idea what are the most important priorities. Or if you're a sales executive and you have a salesperson who's working on a really, really important customer, and again, they leave, then someone needs to take over the job. And again, no one has any context. And so now you have to reset and you have to look at it all again. So when you use something like Matrix, you're able to actually take that and offboard the person by actually ensuring that those priorities can be summarized together and then actually onboard somebody new so someone else can take over the task and have complete understanding of where things were immediately prior to that departure. So that's an aside that I think is very, very important, that most people don't recognize why Matrix is so powerful in the long run. So hopefully that'll give you an incentive to actually track your task and make sure that your team members track their tasks really well, because it will actually help with your business continuity as well. And then next to that, you have the notes section. This is where you can add subtasks. One of the cool things that we have is something called Fill with AI. So I recommend that you can try it out at your convenience. But what it does is actually build subtasks from the tasks that you have. One of the things that we try to do at our company is to ensure that if there's anything we can do to make your workload a little bit easier, we'll do it. And so in this case, Fill with AI, break the main task down into a series of smaller tasks. And then finally, you have the resources section, which is where you can add files, documents, or links, or even emails. So I think it all boils down to what I mentioned earlier, context, right? So when you have a task and that task is to follow up with a client, well, you might have an email from that customer. You might have a presentation. You might have a contract. You might have a link to a SharePoint drive. All of that can be added to the resource section, and Matrix let you link everything together. So it's actually extremely powerful because every single task in Matrix can be linked to another task. And so that allows you to have one central place to track it all. So that's all of this is item details. I didn't go through everything, and yet at the same time, you can see how many capabilities there are. So my advice, when you use Matrix for the very first time, create your task here, and then you can ignore almost all the other features, but make sure you set those due dates, make sure you set those reminders, and then star your most important task. And if you do that, everything else, can fall into place and you can be used as needed. So one thing I want to show you now is that you see how I added this task in quadrant 4, but let's just say I want to make sure that, I understand it's important and urgent, right? Because it is. So I will actually just drag it to quadrant 1. And so when I drag to quadrant 1, it's very visual. It's very easy for me to see where this priority is. And then not only that, all of my coworker who actually have access to this particular project would be on the exact same page. So the beauty is, once you have a project and you have 15, 20 tasks in it, no one has to have a meeting just to get alignment. They can just open up their Prometrics, go to the team project, and see the latest status of every single task. I hope that sinks in, because I think that's the thing that, some people forget, which is, they're thinking, oh man, I have to go and actually have to put in my priorities here and so forth. That's work for me. But what they're forgetting is that it worked right now, but it actually saves so much time and effort when someone else has to go and get an understanding. And instead of having a meeting and meetings and meetings and meetings to create alignments every single week, you just go into your Prometrics and be on that same page almost instantly. A second advice I have for you would be to create a project for your goals. So the way it works is the following. So when you go to project here, you can create project. And when you create project, you can click on blank project. And now you can say maybe goals for Q2 or goals for Q3 or goals for 2024. And so when you create this goals, what happens is you can create a whole new project that's blank. And then from there, you can track the tasks that you have. And let me show you how it works for me. When I have my goals project, there's a couple things that I like to do. Actually, I like to change the quadrant names here. So instead of actually having do now, I actually go to my project details. So when I select that project for the very first time, it opens a project details. And in the project details, I can actually customize the names of every single one of my quadrants. So instead of having do now, I say my long-term goals. Instead of having do later, I have my short-term goals, and then my anti-goals, things that I will not do, and then my catch-all, which is again very similar to my inbox. So by customizing my Prometrics, I can actually use it specific to each of my needs. And so my, tracking goals will be different from whatever initiatives I may have, or tracking my team priorities, or tracking client needs, etc. The other thing I want to show you is actually in the project details, you can actually also star projects. So when you first use Prometrics, you may have only 5 or 10 projects, right? So starring the project is not a big deal. In my main actual work account, I have 300 plus projects. And so for me, when I star a project, it allows me to actually access those projects very easily at the very top left here. So my top left here is my list of projects. My star projects are at the very top. And so when I need to jump to a project, I don't have to scroll through my entire list. I just have to go to the right one. Below that, I have members. So these are the people in each project. So if you create a team project, right, then I recommend that you invite all the appropriate team members. So if you're a manager and you have 5 or 6 direct reports, invite the direct reports in. So then whenever you need to have a meeting and you need to be aligned, during your staff meeting or whatever, everyone can just open up their Prometrics and see exactly what it is that we're going to talk about, right? And it's a fantastic way to build your agenda as well. One of the other things I want to mention to you is other ways to create projects in Prometrics. So if you go to here and again, create project, you have a couple of other options. First, I can choose what's called public templates. And so these are templates that we've created that you can use for free. And it's just various ideas that we've seen in the past. So for example, the 30, 60, 90-day plan. It's a fantastic way for new managers to plan out their first 90 days to ensure that they do whatever they need to be successful. So if you're newly promoted or you're going to be newly promoted, then you might want to launch one of these projects and then use that as a basis to plan out your work for the next 90 days. Also, you can save your own templates. Like I mentioned a while ago, what happens is you can actually create client onboarding projects or employee onboarding projects, or some processes that you actually have that's repetitive. So anything that's repetitive, you can save into Prometrics and launch from that as needed. Of course, one of the things you can do is actually use Prometrics to create projects from CSV files. So there are some teams and organizations, they live in Excel, right? Especially if you're in accounting where you have a recurring basis, whatever, you can actually create a Prometrics template in CSV and then just import it as needed. And likewise, you can export your Prometrics into CSV that you can use for your own reporting as needed. And then lastly, you can create project using AI. And this is actually really neat. So let's just say if your goal is to get a promotion this year, you can go into this option, type in your goal, I want to get a promotion in the next 6 months, or I want to improve my operational efficiency by 20%, or improve my marketing, etc. So you can type your goal in here, click on next, and we'll use our AI to generate a series of tasks and priorities for you. It's meant to be a starting point, and it helps you get started easily. So, I recommend that, if you really want to get deep in Matrix and you really want to take advantage of our capabilities, then try out that feature. Okay, so let's recap what we've talked about so far with respect to Matrix interface. Left-hand side is your list of projects. Within it, you have the 4 quadrants, and then on the right-hand side, you either have the project details or the item details. Now, as you use Matrix more, one of the things you'll realize is that you might want to look at Matrix from a different perspective, as in taking the same data, but sorting it in different ways. So let me show you how that works. Let's just say if I have a project with more tasks, right? I can go to what's called the list view. The list view shows me all the tasks that I have, but in a list format instead, which allows me to sort. So I'd like the list view to identify tasks that are overdue. So for example, if I click due here, it'll actually sort all of these tasks. And then not only that, I can see what tasks have been modified recently. So if you're working on a project and you have a lot of things that's going on at any point in time, and you look at the matrix, it might be very difficult to see what tasks were impacted, what's been modified, what's been updated, and the status of each of those things. And so the list view is helpful for that purpose. Or you can go to the calendar view. So anything that has due dates will show up in the calendar. And when you're here, you can actually click on task, drag and drop as needed, and be able to change the due date as you need. And the calendar view is good to see things within the span of a week to a month. Now, if you want a much longer span, then you go to the timeline / Gantt chart view. So the way the Gantt chart view works is it takes the tasks that you have, showed on a much grander scale, and then not only that, lets you build dependencies. You can actually use the resources section and link those things together. Now, vast majority of you would not use this feature, but if you're a project manager, you can actually build a Gantt chart, take a screenshot of it or print it or whatever, and put it in your report. And Matrix does all of that automatically for you. The reason I'm bringing that up is because, our goal is to also simplify the process in which you consume the data in Matrix. So we actually have a lot of different types of reports, including custom reports for onboarding and offboarding again, or to summarize your projects and all that. So if you're interested in those capabilities, reach out to us directly. And then lastly, you have 2 other views, which is the feed view, which is a history of all the changes, and then also the reports view, which is a way to summarize everything you have within this report. And then on the left-hand side, you actually have a couple of other things. And one of the things I want to show you next is the one-on-one view. Earlier, I mentioned that one of the things that makes Matrix unique is what I call people-centric. And so everything I've talked about so far has been around projects, right? You have a project, you have the task in there. But here's the reality. When you work on something, you typically work on it for somebody, right? So maybe your manager delegated you a task, or again, a client has a series of tasks for you. So the way it works with Matrix is you can go to the one-on-one view here and flip everything around. And instead of actually looking at tasks from a project standpoint, you look at tasks from a people standpoint. So you can select a coworker and see every single task you have in common with that coworker directly from this view. And then not only that, if you're having a one-on-one meeting, you can actually click add share task and create a task directly from here, prioritize the task in the appropriate project, automatically assign this task to the other person. Very, very useful, especially if you manage a large team and you have a lot of one-on-one meetings and you don't want to dive through, click through every single project just to know what's going on. So this single view shows you all the tasks you have in common across all of your projects. And then not only that, if you actually connect to your Office 365, it'll show you all your meetings you have in common with each other, documents you have in common with each other. Okay. I'm going to switch gear a little bit and talk about email management, which I think is actually a very, very important topic because a lot of us are just overwhelmed by it. So Matrix has a very deep integrations into Office Microsoft Outlook. And so when you have an email, one of the things you can do in Party Matrix is actually prioritize that. Let me show you how that works. So let's just say if I get an email that's that I need to prioritize, and the reason's simple, right? Sometimes you can't answer that email right away. Sometimes it takes, a day or two to work on it, or you need to delegate to somebody else, or you might not want to respond to that email for 2 weeks or a month. And flagging it just isn't sufficient, because when you flag an email, it's great if you have 5 flags email, but if you have 50 or 100 flag emails, it's impossible to go through. And then not only that, being able to set those due dates and reminders is so crucial. So if I get an email and I need to prioritize it, I simply click on apps here, choose Party Matrix, turn email into task. And so when you search for the Outlook extension, make sure you search for the turn email into task extension, which is for Outlook. You click on this and you choose prioritize email. And when I choose that option, a panel opens up allowing me to prioritize this email. And actually it takes the subject and put it as the item name. I can customize this as needed. I can actually choose what project it goes in, right? So for example, I'll put that into another project, and then I can put in quadrant 1, and then I can assign it to another person, and I can actually set a due date, and then click capture. So what happens is when I click capture email, it actually create that task. And now this looks just like that item details you saw that I showed you in the web application. And so when I have this view, I can actually customize it further, including setting recurring due dates. I would say remind me weekly. And now suddenly you have an email that is assigned to another person, has a due date, has a recurring reminder, and it ensures that the other person knows exactly when to answer this email, and how important it is. And then not only that, that email is uploaded into the resources section, so your coworker can open that email file and respond to that email directly. And then afterwards, update Party Matrix and say, I'm done with it. So that's very, very useful. But then, imagine a scenario where you get a customer email, but you already have a task created. And so this is a unique Party Matrix feature that I have not seen anyone else do. But what it is it allows you to open Party Matrix, and instead of creating a whole new item, you can attach email to an existing task. So this helps you stay organized, because if you have, if you're managing an external client and you have so many threads that's opening up, imagine what happens if you leave all these emails open, or you have all these flagged, unread emails, etc. So when somebody else takes over the task, or you delegate to somebody else, they also will have to jump through 5 different email threads just to know the status of things. So instead, you can actually search for the Party Matrix task here, hover over that task, and attach. And so what that does is it takes this email and attach it to an existing task into the resources section. So then in that resource section, you may have everything from emails, PowerPoints, quotes, invoices, or links to SharePoint, and all these other things. And so all in one central place. And the beauty of this is that when someone else takes a look at that task, they have it all in one central place. And it is so useful, especially if you have high team turnover, or just you have to pass the buck to another group or something like that. So that's how email management works here within the Outlook integration itself. But Party Matrix also integrates, has what's called an inbox address. So let me show you how that works. When I type a new email here, let's just say if this is my use case all the time. When I'm on the road and I get an email that's really important, and I have Apple Mail. So Apple Mail doesn't have an Outlook integrations, of course. But what I have an inbox address for my Party Matrix. So when I type here, I have a special inbox address. And if I need to either create a task for myself by email, or if I need to forward an email, I can actually create that task directly here. And here's the cool part, which is I can actually type the command as needed. So I can say due tomorrow, remind me weekly in the email itself. And when I click send, this will create a task inside Party Matrix, set the due date, set me recurring reminders. So when I get an email from a customer and I need to make sure that I don't forget it, right? Instead of flagging it and marking it as unread, I forward it into my Party Matrix. I set the due dates and the recurring reminders. I can even assign to a coworker directly from here. So then all you have to do is click send. Now to get to your inbox address, you simply click on inbox here and then copy your secret address. Not only that, every project in Protomatrix has an inbox. Every quadrant in Protomatrix has an inbox, and every quadrant/person in Protomatrix has an inbox. So you can actually create complicated rules that will forward all emails from a certain domain into a certain project, assign it to a certain person directly from your Outlook. The other thing about Outlook too is you can actually have access to the entire Protomatrix within Outlook and not having to leave the application. This is pretty useful from a context switching standpoint, right? I know that all of us, we're just constantly switching contexts. You have to open so many different applications just to see what tasks you have. So instead of doing all that, if you're always finding yourselves in Outlook, simply go to apps here and install Protomatrix and then pin it here. And then now you have access to Protomatrix whenever you need it. And you see how I have this notification home icon here. Whenever I click on that, it shows me all the alerts that I have, which means these are all the items that require my attention. So either the due date trigger, the reminder trigger, or I've been notified of changes that's relevant to me, someone assigned me a task, etc. So that's what the alert section is directly from here. And then once in a while, I would actually clear my alerts so that I have a blank slate. And then again, whenever those important tasks surface back up, I'll get that notification, right? So remember that trick that I mentioned to you, your most important tasks should have those recurring reminders. And so even if you don't see them here or you miss them in the alert section and you clear this out, the next day it'll trigger again and it'll become top of mind. So powerful as a way to ensure that we work on the most important things. By the way, that inbox address works with Gmail. So we actually have also Gmail integrations for email management, but also being able to create rules in Gmail to forward your email as needed. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is actually our Microsoft Teams integration. So if you use Microsoft Teams, make sure that you check out our integrations for Teams, click on apps, install Protomatrix here, and you see how when I open Teams, it's the exact same application inside Teams. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that Protomatrix is there no matter where you are. You could be on Mac, we have a Mac app. If you're on Windows, we have a Windows app. If you're in Outlook, we have an Outlook app. If you're in Teams, we have a Teams app. If you're on a totally different computer, we have the web app. And so Protomatrix is accessible no matter where you are, and all your priorities are with you. And so if you're a manager, you don't have to be at your desk to know what the team's working on. You have full visibility no matter where you are. And then not only that, if you have field workers, they can actually use the Protomatrix application to snap pictures of the work that they've done, right? Similar to how when you get deliveries nowadays, they'll snap a picture where they put it on your front porch. Protomatrix lets you do the exact same thing. So, if you have coworkers that's out in the field and they run into an issue, a quality control issue, they can actually snap pictures, create a task in Protomatrix, and assign to the appropriate folks. And then when that task is done, you have a full understanding of how long it took to process that task. And so if you're trying to have better accountability and improve response time, Protomatrix tracks all of that automatically in the background. So when you use Protomatrix, you don't have to worry about all these other things. Just focus on prioritization. Focus on creating tasks in the appropriate quadrants. Then set those due dates, right? That's all you have to do. The one last thing I'll show inside Teams, and by the way, we're probably the most integrated solutions in Teams, so I can't show you everything that we have, but one of the cool features is having that one-on-one directly inside your Teams chat. So here, every single coworker that you work with, you can simply add the Protomatrix one-on-one, and then as you're talking to that person, open the one-on-one, and you see all the tasks you have in common with them across all of your Protomatrix. And then not only that, you can create shared tasks directly from here. So to add the one-on-one, simply click plus here, and then choose Protomatrix, and then choose one-on-one, and then choose the person. So I recommend that if you use Teams and you manage if you use Microsoft Teams and you manage multiple team members, just go ahead and add the one-on-one for each of them and then select them here. And now when you have meetings, you don't have to say, hey, what did you work on last week? Or, what are the things that we have open? You simply go to the one-on-one view. You can screen share that as needed, but you can actually sort tasks by due dates or modify date and just talk to them directly. powerful way to save you a lot of time and effort. And we try our best to save you as many clicks as possible. And then not only that, provide all the information you need within the context of your meeting. Okay, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and jump back to the slides and wrap things up here. So if you do nothing else, sign up for Protomatrix and use our apps and Teams and Outlook if applicable. And then simply create a project highlighting your top priorities. That's one of the most basic thing I can recommend to you, which is to create a project right after this call, track those tasks that you have, put them into the quadrants, do now, do later, and then ask each of your coworkers to do the same thing, and then you sit down and compare notes. That's it. If you do that today, I guarantee you that you'll find some really fascinating um, uh, things when you have those team meetings, and it's going to surface up disagreements. It's going to surface up misprioritizations, and so people are going to be. You're going to realize people are working on the wrong things and all that. And then if you work with external clients, you can do the exact same exercise. So instead of just asking your clients to provide you with their requirements, ask them to do it from the format of Protomatrix. And so then when your client's able to go and tell you, by the way, these are the things that I need to do most, or I need you to do most, versus these are lower priorities, it is so useful. And so when you have your meeting, you can really focus on the most important things. If you're ambitious, use our AI to create those goals projects so then you can try to meet your goals, and then invite team members so then you have a team priority project. And I truly do recommend, in your staff meeting, project Protomatrix onto the screen. You're going to have a much more, you're going to have a lot of success because everyone will be able to look at that and say, you know what, I see what it is that we need to work on. Some advice: use Protomatrix to track high impact tasks, and then think of Protomatrix as a communication tool. I know I've said it in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, it's about taking all the stuff that's in your brain, right? What you consider to be important, and then asking everyone else to do the exact same thing and communicating to each other. I still think that analogy of walking around the office and seeing a 4-quadrant box floating over their head, and be able to go and look at that and say, oh yeah, hey, I see that we're aligned here, or I see that we're misaligned here. And then lastly, use Protomatrix to manage your personal goals. I think that personal success is extremely important because that's how Protomatrix started a long time ago, ensuring that individuals are able to prioritize their goals. And so we still think that's the core of all of this. What success should look like on a personal level: you should be checking Protomatrix every week to remind yourself of your goals. Me personally, I love having my goal projects because I need to constantly remind myself of my goals. If I don't, I will lose track of things. And then all your priorities should be tracked inside Protomatrix. That's the whole point, right? You shouldn't be using 5 different software and everyone's writing stuff all over the place. You want one central place. So then if anyone needs to take over someone else's job, they can look at the Protomatrix and immediately understand what it is that they need to work on to take over that person's responsibilities. At the team level, everyone's aligned on key tasks. And then finally, if you have a lot of emails like what I showed you, you can prioritize it, triage it to the appropriate team members, and then don't lose track of those emails. That's pretty much it. I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have. And if not, you can also send me an email, hi@affluence.com at any point in time, or helpdesk@affluence.com. But thank you so much for listening. All right, so I got a couple of questions here. I'll go through them. If there are additional questions, go ahead and send them through the chat, and I'd be happy to address them. First question is around Copilots. That's fantastic. So for Copilot, we need either business class or enterprise. But the way it works with Copilot is that actually we have a really cool demo video that Microsoft showed recently at their conference. But what you're able to do with Protomatrix and Copilot is you can just talk to the Copilot and ask, what are the things I need to work on? Or, what are my marketing tasks that's behind schedule? And so the Microsoft Copilot will interact with Protomatrix to provide you those answers. So please reach out to us with your use case and your organization, and we'd be happy to show you what Copilot would look like for your team. But for Copilot in particular, it's for our business and enterprise customers. The next question is, I use my quadrants as do now, do later, recurring, delegate, planning. I'm not sure how to collaborate effectively with others. My delegate might be their do now. That's a fantastic point. And so in this particular case, if you plan on sharing that project with others, then delegate may not be the appropriate quadrant 3. So I think delegate works well on a personal level. So essentially, if you have a project for yourself, then I would use the quadrant you have now. But if you plan on actually sharing a project with others, like a team priority project, then my recommendation is you can use the important and urgent, important but not urgent, urgent but not important as quadrant 3, and then use that to share with your team priorities. We have a couple of other guidance on using quadrant names like impact versus effort. So high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, etc. So it depends on your specific team's needs, but that's my recommendation. I don't know if that's helpful. But you want to make sure that when they look at those quadrants, they have the same understanding as you do with respect to priorities. So in my example, how did I set up the emails to create tasks and send them to PM? That's actually automatically set up for you. I'll show you how to get that again here. So if you go to Protimatrix, and so here I have my Protimatrix, and if I go to inbox, if I click on the secret address, I actually get my address right here. So I can just copy that and set that up as a contact. So my recommendation is once you get this address, set up a contact in Outlook or your Apple Mail and call it, inbox Protimatrix. So then whenever I need to forward an email, I would click, send, and then I click in the I would type inbox, and it automatically fills it in for me. So that's how you get this address. Now you can create what's called a vanity address. So for example, instead of having this really complicated string, you can actually set up a vanity address. And so, maybe at your office or your organization, with that vanity address, you can share with others so they can actually send that email to that address. Now, for every single project, one of the things I mentioned is how you can actually get an email address for every project. If you go to the project details at the top right here, you can actually choose get secret email address. And now from here, I can actually choose what quadrant I want, and I'll get a specific email address for that quadrant. So this is super useful if you want to create automatic rules. As an example, all of my emails that comes from Microsoft.com is forwarded to one of my projects automatically, right? So then it ensures that, if I get an email there, I can actually check my Protimatrix instead of having to look through the email itself. So that's how you do it. And not only that, you can choose what person you want to assign that to. Fantastic questions. So if there's any additional questions, definitely reach out to me. Other than that, this webinar, I'll send the recording out by tomorrow. And please send me any feedback you may have. And if you have any other questions around our other capabilities, be sure to check out some of the other webinars or also reach out to our help desk at affluence.com. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.